My name. Begin with my name. Corta. It's not a Portuguese name. The word is Spanish. It means a cut. It's not really a name in Spanish either. It's a sound that has rolled around the world, from country to country, language to language, and become a word, and then a name, and finally washed up on the shores of Brazil. When you apply to go to the moon, the LDC insists on a DNA test. If you plan on staying, if you plan on raising children, the LDC doesn't want chronic genetic conditions showing up in later life or in your descendants. My DNA is from all over Earth. Old World, New World, Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, Western Mediterranean, Tupi, Japanese, Norwegian. I'm a planet in one woman. Adriana Corta. Adriana, after my great-aunt Adriana. My clearest memory of her is that she played the electric organ. She lived in a tiny apartment, and there in the middle of the room was this huge electric organ. It was the only thing of any value she owned. It was theft-proof. No one could have got it out of the apartment. She would play, and we would dance around it. There were 7 of us. Byron, Emerson, Elise, Adriana, Luis, Eden, Caio. I was the middle kid. The worst place to be, the middle kid. But you get away with things when you're in the middle. Your brothers and sisters are your camouflage. There was always music in the house. My mother couldn't play any instruments, but she loved to sing, and her radio was always on somewhere. I grew up with all the classics. I brought them with me. When I worked on the surface, I'd play them in my helmet. Lucas is the only one who has my love of music. It's a pity he has no voice. Adriana Arena de Corta. My mother was Maria Cecilia Arena. She was a health worker for a Catholic social charity. Child care and no contraception. I'm being unfair to her. She worked up in Villa Canoas. When she retired, the whole favela turned out. My father burned his hand welding a car one day. He went to my mother to have it treated and ended up welded to her. She was a big, slow-moving woman, stiff in the hips, and after Eden, she gave up work and rarely went out of the apartment. She couldn't hope to catch all of us, so she shouted. She had a great booming voice that always found exactly whichever one of us was meant to hear it. She was so kind. Papa adored her. She had bad circulation and a sickly heart. Why are health workers always the least healthy? I miss her still. Of all the ones back there, I think about her most. Adriana Mão de Ferro, Arena de Corta. Mão de Ferro, Iron Hand. What a name, yes? All of us were iron hands, as was my father and all my uncles. It was the nickname of my grandfather Diogo, from Belo Horizonte. He died before I was born, but he worked in the iron mines from the age of 14 until they laid him off because he was a danger to himself and others. 10 million tons he shoveled. I've shoveled more than that. 1,000 times more than that. 10,000 times. If anyone is iron hand, it's me. Mining and metal. My father was a car dealer. He could strip and rebuild an engine before he could drive. He came to Rio when a recession hit Minas Gerais, and he got a job in a cut-and-shut shop. You take 2 insurance write-offs. Cut the front of one, the end off the other, and weld them together. New car. He never liked the work. He was a very honest man, my father. Any news of corruption or graft on the news, and he would shout at the screen. In Brazil, in the 10s and 20s, he was shouting all the time. That graft on the Olympic stadiums. Working people can't afford to ride the bus. He got into dealing cars. Whether that is more honest than building ringers is a moral hair I can't split. But he worked up quickly to a dealership, then gambled and bought a Mercedes franchise. It was the best decision he ever made, after marrying Mai. My father, it seemed, had a gift for business. He moved us to Barra da Tijuca. Oh, I had never seen anything like it. A whole floor of an apartment block just for us. I only had to share a room with one sister. And if we leaned out of the window and craned around, there, down between the other apartment blocks, we could see the sea. Adriana, Maria do Céu, Mão de Ferro, Arena de Corta. Mary of Heaven, Our Lady of the Starry Skies. My mother worked for the Abrigo Cristo Redentor and sent us all to catechism and mass, but she was very far from being a good Catholic. When we were sick, she would light a candle and slip a holy medal under the pillow. But she also bought herbs and prayers and icons from Mãe do Santo. Double insurance, she called it. The more deities on the case, the better. We grew up with 2 invisible worlds overlapping us, saints and orishas. So I was named after a Catholic saint who was also Iemanjá. I remember my mother taking us down to the beach at Barra for Réveillon. It was the one time of the year she would go to the beach. The ocean scared her. We spent the week after Christmas making costumes, blue and white, the holy colors. Mai made fantastic headdresses out of wire and old pairs of tights. Pai would spray paint them in the back of the workshop. That, for me, is the smell of New Year. Car paint. Mai would dress all in white, and everyone treated her with great respect as she walked down to the beach. I felt so proud. She was like a great ship. Millions went to Réveillon up at Rio, but we weren't so shabby down at Barra. This was our festival. Everyone hung out palm fronds on their balconies. Cars drove up and down Avenida Sernambetida, playing music. There was so many people milling around, they could only drive slowly, so it was safe, even for very small kids. There were DJs and lots of food. All the things that Iemanjá loved. Weed, flowers, white flowers, paper boats, candles. We went down to the edge of the water with the ocean at our toes. Even mine, ankle-deep in the breaking waves, sand running out from under her toes. Flowers in our hair, candles in our hands. We were waiting for the moment the edge of the moon rose over the sea. And there it was, the tiniest edge of moon, as thin as a fingernail clipping. It seemed to bleed over the horizon. Huge, so huge. Then my perceptions moved, and I saw that it wasn't rising beyond the edge of the world. It was forming out of the water. The sea was boiling and breaking, and the white of the waves were being pulled together into the moon. I couldn't speak. None of us could. Still, we stood, thousands of us, a line of white and blue along the edge of Brazil. Then the moon rose clear and full, and a line of silver reached across the sea from it to me. The path of Iemanjá. the road the lady walked to reach our world. And I remember thinking, but roads lead both ways. I could walk out along that road to the moon. Then we threw our flowers into the water, and the waves drew them out. We set our little tea lights in the paper boats and put them in to follow the flowers. Most drowned, but some were drawn out along the moon path to Yemanja. I have never forgotten the tiny boats bobbing out along the line of the moon. I never believed that people had walked there, up on the moon. It was inconceivable. The moon was a person, not a stone satellite. People could not walk like fleas on the skins of other people. She still did not believe that people were walking there years later, before I left, when I took her down to the beach. By then she could hardly move. I hired a car and drove the couple of 100 meters to the beach. Pai had lost the dealership. We weren't car people anymore. We had the apartment because Pai had paid off the mortgage early. It was full of us again. Byron, Emerson, Elis, Luis, Eden, Caio, Adriana. All the birds back to roost. Mai was huge as a moon by then, but all the people down for Réveillon paid her respect, and the cars on the Avenida hooted their horns to her. She was great and holy. I took her by the hand down to the water, and we saw the moon seem to form out of the sea, and I said, "I'll be there soon." She laughed and could not believe it. But then she said, "Well, it'll be easy for me to go on to the balcony and wave to you." Adriana Maria do Seu, Mão de Ferro, Arena de Corta. A outra, outrigna. The other one, the little other one. Average Jane. That's my final name. That's the name that has shaped my life the most. The average one. Not the best looker, not the brightest and most outgoing. Not the one Vovu gave the Easter money to first. Average Adriana. I had good legs, but my body was too short and my nose and ears too big. Little slitty eyes, and my skin was too dark. My parents thought they were doing me a favor. They didn't want me to have any illusions. They said, "You'll never be a looker. You'll never be the golden one, the lucky one, so don't expect the world to fall into your hands like a peach. You'll have to work for it. You'll have to use every one of your strengths and talents to get what others get because of their looks, their smiles." The other one. No one has called me that in 50 years. You are the only person on this world knows that name. And I can feel my jaw setting hard, my teeth are clenching. All because of that name. 50 years on this world, and still that name. That name! So, I was born without grace or favor. So, my nose was too big and my skin too dark. I would make myself exceptional. I would be the one who would do anything, dare anything. I knew I would never be caught. In school, I was the kid with her hand up first. I was the girl who wouldn't shut up when the boys were talking. I was the one who hacked into the school network and changed exam results. The obvious geek boy did it. I asked baby Norton, the futsal star all the girls worshipped, to slip his hand down the front of my skirt. And he did, and everyone was so shocked. I wore the camouflage of the pretty around me. I was never again picked for the girls' futsal team. So be it. I found my own sport. Brazilian jiu-jitsu. My mother didn't approve at all. Pai loved MMA on the cable, and he found me a dojo. I was small and sneaky and dirty and could throw boys twice my age. I was in secondary school then. Oh, I was bad. I beat the pretty girls to the guys because they knew I would do anything. I did, but not as much as the pretty girls thought I did. The legend was enough. The pretty girls cut me out of their social cliques and parties. Big loss. They tried schemes and stings to humiliate me, but none of them could dream up a social scam worth a damn. They put stuff about me on Facebook. I hacked them back 10 times. I could code better than all of them put together, and they didn't dare try to physically bully me or throw battery acid at me. I was quick, and I was hard, and I could throw them around like Barbie dolls. Secondary school was war. Isn't it always? Everywhere? The guys were mostly okay, by the way. They talked anal, but guys always talk anal. A blowjob, and they were satisfied. They were as scared of me as the girls. Isn't this scandalous? A lady of my years talking about anal and oral sex? Papai was delighted when he heard I was going to study engineering. Extraction engineering. I was a true daughter of Minas Gerais. A true iron hand. My mother was 10 types of horrified. Engineering was a man's thing. I would never marry. I would never have children. I would eat with my fingers and have dirt under my nails, and no man would look at me. And in São Paulo, that dreadful, dreadful city. I loved São Paulo. I loved the scary ugliness of it. I loved its anonymity. I loved its banality. I loved the endless vista of skyscrapers. I loved that it didn't compromise. Compared to the moon, it's an angel of beauty. There is no beauty on the moon. São Paulo was like me. Nothing to look at, but bursting with energy, ideas, anger, and spit. I found a good group of friends, guys most and first. It was still unusual to find a woman studying extraction engineering, and I knew better how guys worked than girls. Men were simple and straightforward. I found I could have girls as friends. I found out how the friendship of women differs from the friendship of men. I found I could like girls. I found I could love them. I was an opportunist. I was flagrant. I knew tricks. I think of that young woman and her boldness and brashness, and I adore her. She wasted no opportunity. I had only just moved onto the campus when I painted myself in the national flag, head to toenails, and went on a naked bike ride through the streets of São Paulo. Everyone looked at me. No one saw me. I was naked and invisible. I liked that very much. Oh, the body I had then. So much more I could have done with it. I will tell you now about Liotu. He is a name trawled up from deep. Do you know what trawling is? I sometimes forget that there are old world words and ideas the new generations have no reference for. Animal similes? My grandchildren just frown. Luna has never seen a cow or a pig or even a chicken alive and clucking. Liotu. I can't see him clearly anymore, but I remember his voice. He had a southern accent. He was from Curitiba. I think he was my first love. Oh, you smile. I didn't flirt with him, tease him, seduce him, play sexy games with him. So it must have been love. I met him on the jiu-jitsu team. Sports teams, they're all sex, sex, sex. Everyone is doing it all the time. We were at a competition. I was on the women's team, light class, purple belt. He was heavy, black fifth. I remember his weight and his belt, but not his face. Papai would borrow the flashiest Mercedes from the showroom and drive to home competitions. It was a long drive, but he enjoyed it. Afterwards, he would drive me through Jardins and take me out to dinner somewhere expensive. I would step out of that big car and feel like a millionaire. Then one time he drove up, and I didn't get in the car and go with him. I wanted to go drinking beer with Lyotu and then on to a party. I remember the sad look on Papai's face, that we wouldn't be driving down Rua Barão de Capanema again, checking off the menus on the car screen. I think I made him feel like a millionaire, too. He still came to the tournaments, right up until I went to Ouro Preto for post-grad. It was too far for him to drive, and I was losing interest in the fighting by then. Year after year, tumbling about on a mat, to advance by a dan here, a belt there. Lyotu had been dead 2 years by then. We had been lovers for over a year. I wasn't there when he was shot down in Praça da Sé. I was working on a term paper when the word came. I never was the political one. I was an engineer. He was a literature student, an activist. I was just a natural capitalist who had never taken a position because I had never really thought about politics, he told me. I had pragmatism. He had theory. I could never debate with him because he had everything thought out, argument after argument, like a colonial army. When one line fell, the next would advance, firing. The world order was rotten, diseased with social injustice, racism, sexism, inequality, and bad gender politics. I thought that was just the natural state of Brazil. But even I could see the number of helicopters that flew over USP campus increasing every day. The limousines of the hyper-rich, the people who lived up there among the tower tops and never touched the ground. The changes fell like micrometeors, like hundreds of tiny impacts. The bus and metro fares going up again, my friends tagging their bicycles because theft was going up, because fares were going up, shops buying full shutters because more people were sleeping in shop porches, more cameras on the streets because of the street sleepers, surveillance drones. In São Paulo, maybe in some European state or the Gulf, but it is not the Brazilian way. Where there are drones, there will always be police. Where there are police, there will always be violence. And every day the price of bread went up, up, up. If there is one thing that will bring people onto the streets, it's the price of bread. Lyotu was committed. He went down to Praça da Sé and painted placards and occupied spaces. He thought I was uncaring. I was caring, but not about people I didn't know. Not about Chinese companies buying up whole provinces and driving people off the land. Not about refugees from the country, who even favelados looked down on. I could only care about what I knew. My family, my friends, the family I would have someday. Family first. Family always. I was scared for him. I watched YouTube. I could see how the protests were escalating, shouting to stones, to petrol bombs. Each step the police responded. Riot shields, to tear gas, to guns. I told him I didn't like him going down there. I told him he could get arrested. or go to jail and get his CPF pulled, and he could never get credit or a proper job. I told him that he cared more about strangers than he did about people who cared for him, about me. We split up for a while. We still had sex. No one ever really splits up. At first, I didn't know what had happened. All at once, a dozen messages came up. OMG, police shooting, people shot, shots fired, Lyotu wounded, Lyotu okay, Lyotu shot. Messages coming in, one on top of the other. There was jerky camera feed, a body dragged into a shop door. Then sirens, ambulances arriving, all jerky, all shaking, nothing in focus. In the distance, gunshots. Have you ever heard gunshots? I suppose not. No guns on the moon. They sound small and mean. All this information bombarding me, but I couldn't pick the truth out of it. I tried calling him. No signal. Then the rumors started to coalesce. Lyotu had been shot. He had been taken to hospital. Which hospital? Can you imagine how helpless I felt? I called round everyone I knew who knew Lyotu, who knew any of his activist friends. Hospital Syriu Libanese. I stole a bicycle. It took me seconds to hack the tracking chip. I rode like a madwoman through São Paulo traffic. They wouldn't let me see him. I waited in the emergency room. There were police everywhere and news cameras. I said nothing and sat at the back. The police would have asked me questions. Then the news people. I listened and listened, but I couldn't hear anything about how he was. Then his family came. I had never met them. I didn't even know he had a family, but I could see at once who they were. I waited and waited, trying to overhear. Then the word came that he had died in the emergency room. The family were devastated. The hospital staff kept the police away. The news people got all the right shots. There was nothing to be done, nothing to be taken back. Death keeps everything. I crept away on my stolen bike. Lyotu died, and 5 others. He wasn't the first to be shot, so no one remembered his name. No one sprayed it on walls and buses. Remember Lyotu Matsushita. No one remembers the second man on the moon. I remember I was shocked, numb, terrified. But my chief emotion was anger. I was angry that he thought so little of me to put himself in danger of death. I was angry that he died in such a stupid way. I remember the anger, but I can't feel the sickness, the set of the muscles, the pressure behind the eyes, the feeling of dying inside over and over again. I'm old. I'm a long way from that engineering student at USP. Does anger have a half-life? I wonder if he had lived, what Lyotu would have thought of me. I'm rich, and I'm powerful. With a word, I can switch off every light on Earth and plunge the planet into darkness and winter. I'm not even the 1%. I'm the 1% of the 1%, the ones who left Earth. Within a week, we had forgotten about Lyotu Matsushita, the second martyr. There were new riots, new deaths. The government made promises and broke them all. Then came the first of a series of crashes, each one bringing the country and economy lower, until it hit the ground and broke beyond any repair. I didn't know then that Lyotu was one of the first casualties in the class war. The great class war. Final class war. the hollowing out of the middle class. The financialized economy didn't need workers, and mechanization was driving the middle classes into a race to the bottom. If a robot could do it acceptably and cheaper, the robot got your job. The machines made you bid against them. The machines even supplied the apps you used to bid against them and against each other. If you were cheaper than a machine, you ate. Just. We always thought the robot apocalypse would be fleets of killer drones and war mecha the size of apartment blocks and Terminators with red eyes, not a row of mechanized checkouts in the local Extra and the Alco station, online banking, self-driving taxis, an automated triage system in the hospital. One by one, the bots came and replaced us. And here we are, in the most machine-dependent society humanity has ever produced. I've grown rich. I've built a dynasty on those very robots that beggared Earth. My father didn't remember the North Americans landing on the moon, but he told me old Maungiferru did. He was drinking in a bar in Belo Horizonte. The television was switched to the football, and Maungiferru almost started a fight, insisting the bar owners switch over to the moon landing. "This is history," he said. "We won't see a greater thing in our time." "Faked," the others in the bar shouted. "Shot on a Hollywood soundstage." But he stood in front of the television, staring up at the black and images, daring anyone to turn it back to the football. And I remember when the Mackenzies put robots on the moon. I, too, was in a bar with my study group. I had gone back to the homeland, to Minas Gerais, and Deming, the mining institute, for post-grad. I was even more of an oddity in Ouro Preto. No, I was unique. I was the only woman. The men were over-polite and clubbish. I would not let them leave me out, so I was drinking beer with them in that bar. The bar owner was flicking between sports channels when he dropped for a moment onto the news. I saw the moon. I saw machines. I saw wheel tracks. I shouted at the barman, "Hey, hey, hey, leave it!" I was the only person in that bar watching the screen, watching history happening. The Australian Mackenzie Mining Corporation had sent robots to the moon to prospect for rare earth metals for the IT industry. "Why aren't you watching this?" I wanted to shout to my group. "Why can't you see what I see? Call yourself engineers?" Watching that screen, I felt a flash of understanding, a brilliance in my head. I felt as if my breath were catching, as if my heart was skipping every third, fourth beat. It was a feeling of the impossible becoming not just possible, but achievable. By me. Then the news item moved on. It was far down the news. No one was interested in space and science. News was what telenovela stars and models did. I went out of the bar, into the beer garden, and sat on the wall under the dusty trees and looked up into the night. I saw the moon. I said to myself, there are things up there making money. My father came to see me. He came on the bus. I knew instantly the news was bad. Ouro Preto was a long way, but my father would have made an adventure out of the drive. He had lost the dealership. No one was buying high-end Mercedes anymore, not even in Baja. He'd been careful, bought out the apartment, and my education was safe, as long as I delivered in the next 2 years and did not fill the fridge with beer on a weekly basis. But the business was over, and at his age there was no hope of him re-skilling for the machine code economy, let alone finding another job. He was sorry yet proud. He had done everything he could, the best he could. The markets had failed him. Then Our Lady of Tuberculosis came and knocked his plans off the table. Caillou, boy baby, kid brother. Caizinho, the runt of the litter, we called him. He had never moved out, perpetually 13 years old, it seemed. As jobs collapsed and marriages failed and families imploded, the rest of Mama and Corta's 7 babies moved back in. All but me, the learner, the keeper. Then Caillou breathed in bacillus of TDR tuberculosis. A bus, a classroom, mass. There were 3 types of tuberculosis then: MDR, XDR, TDR. Multiply drug-resistant, extensively drug-resistant, totally drug-resistant. MDR resists the first-line antibiotics. XDR resists even the second-line drugs, which are basically toxic chemotherapy treatments. TDR? You can guess that. The White Lady, we called it, and she wafted into Caillou's lungs and grew there. Mamai turned a room into a sanatorium, sealed it up with plastic. Papa engineered an air conditioning unit. They couldn't afford the hospital, they couldn't afford the drugs. They bought experimental treatments on the black market, experimental Russian phages, chemo-hacked generic pharmaceuticals. I came home. I saw Caillou through plastic. It wasn't safe to go into the room. Mai slid his meals in on trays my siblings stole from McDonald's, in through 2 layers of heavy plastic. Caillou double-bagged the refuse. I saw him. I saw Pai tired to the marrow. I saw Mai talking to her saints and orishas. I saw my brothers and sisters and their children scraping a hayal where they could, scrap-dealing here, buying and selling there, running an animal lottery there. Caillou would die, but I couldn't begrudge my family saving every centavo in hope. They could not afford my completing my post-grad. There was a way I could finish. The advertisements had been appearing in the professional journals and sites within weeks of the Mackenzie landing. I applied to work on the moon. My advisor of studies helped me with the loan application. My paper on solar distillation of rare earth elements from lunar regolith marked me as a valuable asset in lunar development. I got a contract with Mackenzie Metals. My application was approved. I got the loan. I went home that weekend. I could afford to fly. I went down to Baja, and I saw the grass sprouting through the Niemeyer cobbles. Shrubs had taken root on apartment rooftops and empty windows. Avenida Cernambitida was lined with stalls and shelters, and every apartment block was webbed in water pipes and electricity cables like strangling figs. Every traffic circle held a cluster of water tanks and solar panels. The football stadium, the Olympic Park, the uprooted seating, roofs half missing since the last storm. The city was failing. The planet was failing. The apartment was crammed full of people, but I was given my own room. Caillou was still in his plastic cave. He was on oxygen now. Caillou and I in our chambers, the dying prince and the homecoming princess. Television day and night, people coming and going day and night, husbands and wives and partners and their relatives, family members who were not family members. And my mamai, so big she could only waddle, ruling them all with her shout. I went out onto the balcony that night, and I saw the moon. Yemanja, my goddess. Only she was not forming out of the sea. She was far beyond the world, and the world was turning to her. The world was turning and bringing me under her gaze, and all the water in the ocean was drawn to her, and me with it. Oh, me with it. I loved training for the moon. I ran, I swam, I did weights and cross. I was lean and purposeful and so fit. I adored my muscles. I think I was very much in love with myself. I was not just the iron hand, I was the iron woman. The South American Training Center was in Guyana, near the Isa launch facility. Out running, I would hear the roar of the orbital transfer vehicle engines powering up. They shook me until I couldn't hear. They shook earth and heaven. Then I saw the vapor trail, curving upwards, and the tiny dark needle of the spaceplane at its tip, powering up, away from the world. It made me cry every time. The thing about training for the moon, you aren't training for the moon, you're training for launch. The moon had no need for my fantastic body. The moon would eat it slowly. The moon would change me to itself. I wasn't the only woman, but almost. The Koru facility was des mines on steroids. The moon would be like a giant college football team in space. I realized that the moon was not a safe place. It knew 1,000 ways to kill you if you were stupid, if you were careless, if you were lazy. But the real danger was the people around you. The moon was not a world, it was a submarine. Outside was death. I would be sealed in with these people. There was no law, no justice. There was only management. The moon was the frontier, but it was the frontier to nothing. There was nowhere to run. It took 3 months to make me ready for the moon. Centrifuge training, freefall training, up in an ancient A319 over the South Atlantic, and me throwing up every single time we went into the dive. And the suit training. The suits were huge, clunking things compared to the sasuits we have now. Try threading screws in those gauntlets. I was good at it. Good fine motor skills. Low-pressure training, zero-pressure training, low-G manufacturing, vacuum manufacturing, robotics, and 3D print coding. 3 months, 3 years wouldn't have been enough. 3 lifetimes. And then it was 3 weeks to launch day. I went back home. Papa threw a party on the roof. He always leaped at any chance to hold a churrascaria. Everyone told me how hot I looked. It was a great party. Joy shot through with saudade. It was a wake for the dead. Everyone knew I would never come back. Caillou died 3 days before launch. And my thought wasn't loss or grief. My thought was, why couldn't you have waited? A week, even 5 days. Why did you have to give me something to feel? When all my feeling is taken up by that big moon up there, and that star in the morning sky that grows a little brighter every day, the cycler approaching Earth, and most immediately that black bird waiting to roll out from Hangar 6 onto the strip. So, anger. Then guilt. I asked for compassionate leave. I was refused. I couldn't risk infection so close to launch day. Any bug would rip through the confined spaces of the cycler and the facility. The moon was an enormous, clean room. We were checked daily for viral infections, parasites, insects. No vermin on the moon. So, They burned Caillou to kill the White Lady as I was driven out in the pressurized bus to the space plane. We had practiced embarkation a dozen times in the hangar, but we still pressed to the darkened windows for our first glimpse of the OTV, black and glinting naked under the sun. The sense of power, of human ability, was so strong. Many of the men cried. Men are so easily moved. We strapped in, suited and helmeted, no windows, the screens off. We had done it 20 times before, but I still fumbled with the straps, the safety checklist. I wasn't ready. No one could be for a thing like this. I couldn't stop thinking about the hydrogen tanks before and behind me, the oxygen tank under my feet. I was rigid with fear. Then I found there was a place beyond that fear. Not calm, not beautiful, nor resigned or helpless, but firm and resolute. Then the OTV rolled out, and it went kunk, kunk, kunk over the strip where its tires had developed flat spots from the standing. 50 years, and I remember it all so clearly. I felt us turn onto the strip. I felt the space plane pause, then the engines fire. Oh, my. The power. You won't have felt anything like it, not even if you've gone by the Baltrang. It's like every part of you yelling. And I found out what was beyond the resolution, beyond the fear. Excitement. Pure excitement. This was the sexiest thing I had ever done. The engines cut out. A slight shock. The payload pod had unlatched. We were in free fall. I felt my stomach begin to unravel, the acid bile burning up my throat. Vomiting in your helmet is not just vile, it can drown you. Then I felt centrifugal force tug at the base of my stomach, and I knew the tether had us and was swinging us up into a transfer orbit to the cycler. The G's peaked. The blood rushed to my toes. Free fall again. The next touch of weight I would feel would be in the centrifuge arms of the cycler. A judder, a lurch, loud clunks and clangs, and servo whine. We had docked with the cycler. Our belts released. I pushed myself free towards the open lock. It looked far too small even for small me, but I was through. We were all through. All 24 of us. I stayed a time in the lock, clinging to a stanchion, fighting nausea, looking through a tiny window at the space plane hanging against the huge blue earth. It was too big, too close to reveal the movement of the cycler rushing away from it. But I felt it. I was out on the moon path. Me. Adriana Maria do Céu Maungiferu Arena de Corta. I met Achi because free-fall sex made me sick. It was all the talk during training. Free-fall sex. It's all they do. It's all they want to do. It ruins you forever. After free-fall sex, heavy sex is gross and ugly. Those Vorontsov space people, they're sex ninjas. They were matching us up even as we swam in through the lock. Those Vorontsov space people. There was one guy. He looked, and I looked back, and nodded, yes, I will, yes, even as the tether snatched the transfer pod away from the cycler and cut our last connection with Earth. I'm no prude. I've got the New Year Barra beach bangles. I'm up for a party and a chance for life-changing sex. You don't pass on that. I wanted to try it with this guy. We went up to the hub. There were bodies everywhere, drifting, bumping into each other. The men had to use condoms. You didn't want to get hit by that stuff flying. I said, "Be kind." And I did something worse than flying cum. I threw up all over him. I couldn't stop throwing up. That's not sexy. Zero G turned everything inside me upside down. He was very polite and vacuumed it all up while I retreated to gravity. The only other person in the centrifuge arm was this caramel-eyed girl, slender hands and long fingers, her face flickering every few moments into an unconscious micro-frown. She would barely meet my eyes. She seemed shy and inward-gazing. Her name was Achi de Basso. I couldn't place the name. It was like nothing I had ever heard before, but like mine, it was a name rolled by the tide of history. She was Syrian, Syriac. That one letter was a universe of difference. Her family were Syrian Christians who had fled the civil war. She left Damascus as a cluster of cells in her mother's womb. London-born, London-raised, MIT-educated, but she was never allowed to forget, "You are Syriac." Achi was born an exile. Now she was headed into a deeper exile. Up in the hub, our future co-workers fucked. Down in the centrifuge pod, we talked, and the stars and the moon arced across the window beneath our feet. And each time we met, the whirling moon was a little bigger, and we knew each other a little bit better. And by the end of the week, the moon filled the whole of the window, and we had moved from conversationalists into friends. She was a girl filled with ghosts, Achi. The ghost of having no roots, the ghost of being an exile from a dead country, the ghost of privilege. Daddy was a software engineer, Mummy came from money. London welcomed refugees like that. The ghost of guilt, that she was alive when tens of thousands were dead. Her darkest ghost was the ghost of atonement. She could not change the place or order of her birth, but she could apologize for it by being useful. This ghost rode her all her life, shouting in her ear, "Be useful, Achi!" All the way through grad at UCL, post-grad at MIT, make things right, atone. The ghost of useful sent her to battle desertification, salinization, eutrophication. She was an Asian warrior. In the end, it drove her to the moon. Nothing more useful than sheltering and feeding a whole world. If these were her ghosts, her guiding spirit, her orisha, was Yemanja. Achi was a water girl. Her family home was near the Olympic pool. Her mother had dropped her into water days out of the hospital. She had sunk, then she swam. She swam and surfed. Long British summer evenings on the western beaches. Cold British water. She was small and slight, but feared no wave. I grew up with the sounds of waves in my bedroom, but never dipped more than a toe in the warm Atlantic. I come from beach people, not ocean people. She missed the ocean terribly on the moon. She tuned the screens in her apartment to make it look like she lived on a coral reef. It always made me a bit sick. As soon as any new tank or pool was built and there was a chance for swimming, she would be there, stroking up and down through the water. The way she moved through it was so natural, so beautiful. I would watch her dive and push herself down through the water, and I wanted her to stay down there forever, her hair floating around her, her breasts weightless in the water, her hands and feet making these tiny, beautiful movements that held her in position, or sent her flashing across the tank. I see her still in water. She introduced me to her ghosts, I showed her mine. Otrina, Average Jane, Little Lady Look at Me, Plain Jane, and the Mermaid. They would need each other very much in the days and the months to come. The moon was a wild place then. Now she is old like me, but then, in the early days, she was the land of riches and danger, opportunity and death. It was the land of the young and the ambitious. You needed aggression to survive on the moon. She would try and kill you any way she could, by force, by trickery, by seduction. There were 5 men for every woman, and they were young males, middle class, educated, ambitious, and scared. The moon was not a safe place for men, even less safe for women. For the women, it was not just the moon. There were the men, too. And we were all scared, all the time. Scared as the moon loop spun up to meet us, as the transfer capsule docked, and we knew that the only way was forward. We needed each other, and we stuck and we clung in our suits all the way down. The free-fall sex? Grossly oversold. Everything moves in all the wrong ways. Things get away from you. You have to strap everything down to get purchase. It's more like mutual bondage. We came out of the moon loop dock. There was only one transfer tether then, in a polar orbit. 120 Joe moonbeams. It's an old word, that, one of the oldest on the moon. Joe moonbeam. It sounds bright and wide-eyed and innocent. We were all that. Even before they officially welcomed, the LDC planted the chibs on our eyeballs. We had 10 inhalations free, then we started paying. We've been paying ever since. Air, water, carbon, data. The 4 elementals. You were born here. You won't remember a time when you didn't have those numbers in your eye. But I tell you, the first time you see the numbers change because the market has shifted, your breath catches in your throat. Nothing tells you that you are not on Earth anymore than exhaling at one price and inhaling at another. Then they pushed us into medical. They wanted to look at my bones. You don't think about the bones. To Joe Moonbeams, everything is new and demanding. You need to learn how to move. You need to learn how to stand. You need to learn how to see and hear. You learn about your blood and your heart and dust and how that's the thing that is most likely to kill you. You learn evacuation drills and depressurization alarms and what side of a door to be on and when it's safe to open it. You learn when to help people and when to abandon people. You learn how to live on top of each other, breathe each other's air, drink each other's water. You learn that when you die, LDC will take you and break you down and recycle you for carbon and calcium and compost. You learn that you don't own your body. You don't own anything. From the moment you step off the moon loop, everything is rented. You don't think about the bones, but they tick away under the skin, hour by hour, day by day, loon by loon, losing mass and structure. Again, sister, you were born here. This is your home. You can never go to Earth. But I had a window through which I could return. I had 2 years until my bone density and muscle tone deteriorated to a point where Earth gravity would be fatal to me. 2 years. It was the same for all of us. 2 years. It's still the same for every Joe Moonbeam who arrives at Meridian looking for the land of opportunity. We all of us face our moon day when we have to decide, do I stay or do I go? They looked at my bones, They looked at Achi's bones, and then we forgot about them. We moved into barracks, Achi and I. The Joe Moonbeam accommodation was a warehouse with partitions to mark off your living space. Shared bathrooms, mess hall meals. There was no privacy. What you couldn't see, you could hear, and what you couldn't hear, you could smell. The smell. Sewage and electricity and dust and unwashed bodies. The women naturally banded together. Achi and I traded to get cubicles beside each other, then merged them into one space. We held a little ritual that night and swore undying sisterhood over weird-tasting cocktails made from industrial vodka. Humans had been on the moon only 5 years, and already there was a vodka industry. We made decorations from fabric scraps. We grew hydroponic flowers. We had socials and parties, and we were the central point for the tampon trade. It was like a prison economy, with tampons instead of cigarettes. We had a natural social gravity, Achi and I. We drew the women, and the men who got tired of all the loud voices and the macho boasting. We're the world breakers, the moon busters. We're gonna take this rock and shake 1,000,000 bitsies out of it. We're going to fuck this moon. I've never been in the military, but I think it might be a bit like the moon in those early days. We weren't safe. No one was safe. 10% of Joe Moonbeams died within 3 months. In my first week, an extraction worker from Xinjiang was crushed in a pressure lock. 24 launched from Kourou on my OTV. 3 were dead before we even finished surface activity training. One was the man who had flown up in the seat next to me. I can't remember his name now. We recycled their bodies and reused them, and we ate the vegetables and fruit they fertilized and never thought twice about the blood in the soil. You survive by choosing what not to see and hear. I told you about the stink of the moon. What it stank of most was men. Testosterone. You breathed constant sexual tension. Every woman had been assaulted. It happened to me. Once. An older worker, a duster in the lock as I was changing into my training suit. He tried to slip the hand. I caught and threw him the length of the lock. USP Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu team. My father would have been proud. I had no trouble from that man, or any other man, but I was still scared they would come as a gang. I couldn't have fought a gang. They could hurt me. They might even kill me. There were contracts and codes of behavior, but there were only company managers to enforce them. Sexual violence was a disciplinary matter. But Achi didn't know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She didn't know any fighting art. She had no way to defend herself when the man tried to rape her. He didn't succeed. A group of other men pulled him off. He was lucky. If I had caught him, I would have stabbed him. I was glad of those men. They understood that we had to find a way to live together. The moon couldn't be another Earth. If we turned on each other, we would all die. I did think about finding that man and killing him. Corta's cut. That's our name. Hard, sharp, fast. There are 1,000,000 ways of killing cleverly on the moon. I thought about it long and hard. Should it be secret vengeance, or should my face be the last thing he ever saw? I chose another way. I am many things, but I am not a killer. For Achi's attacker, I used slower, subtler weapons. I found his surface activity training squad. I made some adjustments to his suit thermostat. It would look like a perfect malfunction. I'm a good engineer. He didn't die. He wasn't meant to die. I count his frostbitten thumb and 3 toes as my trophies. Everyone knew it was me, but nothing was ever proved. I liked the legend. If it made men look at me with fear, that was good. Hanif was his name. He swore he'd rape me and gut me from his hospital bed. By the time he got out of med center, Achi and I were out on contract. Achi got a contract with the Asamoahs designing ecosystems for their new agrarium under Amundsen. My contract with Mackenzie Metals took me out onto the open seas. She would be a digger, I would be a duster. In 2 days we would be parted. We clung to the I&A barracks. We clung to our cabins, our friends. We clung to each other. We were scared. The other women threw a party for us. Moon mojitos and sing-alongs to tablet music software. But before the music and the drinking, a special gift for Achi. Her work with AKA would keep her underground, digging and scooping and sewing. She need never go on the surface. She could go her whole career, her whole life, in the caverns and lava tubes and huge agraria. She need never see the raw sky. I used all my charm and reputation, but the suit hire was still cosmologically expensive. I contracted 30 minutes in a GP surface activity shell. It was an armored hulk next to my lithe sawsuit Spider-Woman. We held hands in the outlock as the pressure door slid up. We walked up the ramp amongst 100,000 boot prints. We walked a few meters out onto the surface, still holding hands. There, beyond the comms towers and the power relays and the charging points for the buses and rovers, beyond the gray line of the crater rim that curved on the close horizon and the shadows the sun had never touched, there, perched above the edge of our tiny world, we saw the full earth, full and blue and white, mottled with greens and ochres, full and impossible and beautiful beyond any words of mine. It was winter, and the southern hemisphere was offered to us, the ocean half of the planet. I saw great Africa. I saw dear Brazil. Then my suit AI advised me that we were nearing the expiry of our contract, and we turned our backs on the blue earth and walked back down into the moon. That night we drank to our jobs, our friends, our loves, and our bones. In the morning we parted. It was 6 loons before I saw Achi again, 6 loons on the sea of fecundity, sifting dust. I was stationed at Mackenzie Metals' Messier unit. It was old, cramped, creaking, cut-and-cover pods under bulldozed regolith berms. Too frequently I was evacuated to the new-cut deep levels because of a radiation alarm. Every time I saw the alarm flash its yellow trefoil in my lens, I felt my ovaries tighten. Day and night the tunnels trembled to the vibration of the digging machines, eating deep rock. There were 80 dusters in Messier. There was a sweet man. His name was Chuyu, a 3D print designer. Kind and funny and talented with his body. After a month of laughing and sweet sex, he asked me to join his amory. Chuyu, his amour in Queen, his amour in Meridian, her amour also in Meridian. We agreed terms. 6 months, who I would and would not have sex with, seeing others outside the amory, bringing others into the amory. We had nikas even then. It had taken him so long to ask me, Chuyu confessed, because of my rep. Word about Achi's attacker had reached Messier. I wouldn't do that to an amour, I said. not unless severely provoked. Then I kissed him. The amory was warmth and sex, but it wasn't Achi. We talked or networked almost every day, but I still felt the separation. Lovers are not friends. I had 10 days furlough, and my first thought was to spend it with Achi. I could see Chuyu's disappointment as I kissed him goodbye at Messier's bus lock. It wasn't a betrayal. I'd said in the contract that I would not have sex with Achi de Basso. We were friends, not lovers. Achi had come up to the railhead at Hypatia to meet me, and all the way down the line to Queen of the South we talked and laughed. So much laughter. Such fun she had planned for me. Messier was smelly and cramped. Queen of the South was intense, loud, colorful. In only 6 loons it had changed beyond recognition. Every street was longer, every tunnel wider, every chamber higher. Achi took me in a glass elevator down the side of the recently completed Thoth Quadra, and I reeled from vertigo. Down on the quadra floor was a small copse of dwarf trees. Full-size trees would reach the ceiling, Achi explained. There was a cafe. In that cafe, I first tasted and immediately hated mint tea. I built this, Achi said. These are my trees. This is my garden. I was too busy looking up at the lights, all the lights, going up and up. Such fun. Tea, then shops. I had to find a party dress. We were going to a special party that night, exclusive. We browsed the catalogs in 5 different print shops before I found something I could wear. Very retro. It was the 1980s then, padded and cinched, but it hid what I wanted hidden. Then the shoes. The special party was exclusive to Achi's work group. A security-locked rail capsule took us through a dark tunnel into a space so huge, so blinding, that I almost threw up over my Balenciaga. An agrarium, Achi's last project. I was at the bottom of a shaft 1 kilometer tall, 50 meters wide. The horizon is close at eye level on the moon. Everything curves. Underground, a different geometry applies. The agrarium was the straightest thing I had seen in months. And brilliant. A central core of mirrors ran the full height of the shaft, bouncing raw sunlight one to another, to walls terraced with hydroponic racks. The base of the shaft was a mosaic of fish tanks, crisscrossed by walkways. The air was warm and dank and rank. I was woozy with CO2. In these conditions, plants grew fast and tall. Potato plants the size of bushes, tomato vines so tall I lost their heads in the tangle of leaves and fruit. Hyper-intensive agriculture. The agrarium was huge for a cave, small for an ecosystem. The tanks splashed with fish. Did I hear frogs? Were those ducks? Achi's team had built a new pond from waterproof sheetings and construction frame. A pool, a swimming pool, a sound system played Ghana pop. There were cocktails. Yellow was the fashion. They matched my dress. Achi's crew were friendly and expansive. They never failed to compliment me on my frock. I shucked it and my shoes and everything else for the pool. I lolled. I luxuriated. Over my head the mirrors moved. Achi swam up beside me, and we trod water together, laughing and plashing. The agrarium crew had lowered a number of plastic chairs into the pool to make a shallow end. Achi and I wafted blood-warm water with our legs and drank golden bison grass vodka. I woke up in bed beside Achi the next morning, shit-headed with vodka. I remember mumbling, fumbling love, shivering and stupid whispering, skin to skin, finger works. Archie was curled on her right side, facing me. She had kicked the sheet off in the night. A tiny string of drool ran from the corner of her mouth to the pillow and trembled in time to her breathing. I see it still. I looked at her there, her breath rattling in the back of her throat in drunken sleep. We had made love. I had sex with my dearest friend. I had done a good thing. I had done a bad thing. I had done an irrevocable thing. Then I lay down and pressed myself close to her, and she mumble-grumbled and moved in close to me, and her fingers found me, and we began again. My mother used to say that love was the easiest thing in the world. Love is what you see every day. That was how she fell in love with my father. Every day she passed him, welding. I did not see Archie for several lunes after the party in Queen. Mackenzie Metals sent me out prospecting new terrain in the Sea of Vapors. Away from the Sea of Vapors, it was plain to me and Sun Chuyu that the Amory didn't work for me. I had broken my contract, but in those days there were no financial implications of extra-contractual sex. All the Amors agreed to annul the contract and let me leave the Amory. No blame, no claim. A simple, automated contract terminated. I took a couple of weeks' accumulated leave back in Queen. I called Archie about hooking up, but she was at a new dig at Tfei, where the Asamoahs were building a corporate headquarters. I felt relieved. Then I felt guilty that I had felt relieved. Sex had made everything different. I drank, I partied, I had one-night stands. I talked long hours of expensive bandwidth with Mum and Dad back in Baja. The entire family gathered in front of the lens to thank me for the money, especially the tiny kids. They said I looked different, longer, drawn out. There they were, happy and safe. The money I sent them bought their education, health, weddings, babies. And here I was on the moon. Potrina Adriana, who would never get a man, but who got the education, who got the degree, who got the job, sending them the money from the moon. They were right. I was different. I never felt the same about that blue pearl of earth in the sky. I never again hired a sasut to go look at it. Just look at it. Out on the surface, I disregarded it. The Mackenzies sent me out to the Landsberg extraction zone, and there I saw the thing that made everything different. 5 extractors were working Landsberg. Have you seen an extractor? Of course not, forgive me. You've never been on the surface. They are ugly things, with their insides exposed. They were no more elegant then, but to me they were beautiful, marvelous bones and muscles. I saw them one day out on the regolith, and I almost fell flat from the revelation. Not what they were made for, separating rare earth metals from lunar regolith, but what they threw away. Launched in high, arching, ballistic jets on either side of the big, slow machines. It was the thing I saw every day. One day you look at the boy on the bus, and he sets your heart alight. One day you look at the jets of industrial waste, and you see riches beyond measure. The plan formed there and then, all at once in my head. By the time I made it back to the rover, it was in place, every last detail, intricate and engineered and beautiful, and I knew it would work straight out of the box. But for it to work, I had to put distance between myself and anything that might link me to regolith waste and beautiful rainbows of dust. The Mackenzies could have no claim on any part of it. I quit Mackenzie and became a Vorontsov track queen. I went up to Meridian to rent a data crypt and hunt for the leanest, freshest, hungriest law firm to protect the thing I had seen out on Landsberg. And there I saw Achi again. She had been called back from Tve to solve a problem with microbiota in the Obuasi agrarium that had left it a pillar of stinking black slime. 1 city, 2 friends, 2 amours. We went out to party, and found we couldn't. The frocks were fabulous, the cocktails disgraceful, the company louche, and the narcotics dazzling. But in each bar, club, private party, we ended up in a corner together, talking. Partying was boring. Talk was lovely and bottomless and fascinating. We ended up in bed again, of course. We couldn't wait. Glorious, impractical 1980s frocks lay crumpled on the floor, ready for the recycler. I remember when Achi asked, "What do you want?" She was lying on the bed and inhaling THC from a vapor. I could never take that stuff. It made me paranoid. And she also said, "Dream and don't be afraid." And I answered, "I want to be a dragon." Achi laughed and punched me on the thigh, but I had never said truer words. In the 1.5 years we had been on the moon, our small world had changed. Things moved fast in those early days. We could build an entire city in months. We had energy and raw materials and human ambition. 4 companies had emerged as major economic forces. The 4 families. The Mackenzies were the longest established. They had been joined by the Asamoahs in food and living space. The Vorontsovs finally moved their operations off Earth entirely and ran the cycler, the moon loop, the bus service, and were wrapping the world in rails. The Swans had been fighting the People's Republic's representatives on the LDC board and had finally broken free from terrestrial control. 4 companies, 4 dragons, and I would be the 5th dragon. I didn't tell her about what I'd seen out there on Landsberg. I didn't tell her about the data vault and the squad of legal AIs. I didn't tell her about the brilliant idea. She knew I was keeping secrets from her. I put a shadow in her heart. I went to my new job, laying track. The work was good, easy and physical and satisfying. At the end of every upshift, you saw 3 kilometers of gleaming rail among the boot and track prints, and on the edge of the horizon, the blinding spark of Crucible, brighter than any star, advancing over yesterday's rails, and you said, "I made that." The work had real measure, the inexorable advance of Mackenzie metals across the Mare Insularum, brighter than the brightest star. So bright it could burn a hole through your helmet sunscreen if you held it in your eye line too long. Thousands of concave mirrors focusing sunlight on the smelting crucibles. In 10 years, the rail lines would circle the globe, and the crucible would follow the sun. By then, I would be a dragon. I was sintering 10 kilometers ahead of Crucible when Achi's call came. Ting-ching, and it all came apart. Achi's voice blocking out my work mix music, Achi's face superimposed on the dirty gray hills of Raimi Mestlin. Achi telling me her routine medical had given her 4 weeks. I hitched a ride on the construction car back down the rails to Crucible. I waited 2 hours, squatting in the shadows, tons of molten metal and 10,000 Kelvin sunlight above my head. That's time to realize the irony. That's not a tradable commodity here. I hid from the Mackenzies by working ahead of them. I lurked in the dark places of their capital. I rode a slow freight train to Meridian. 10 hours clinging onto a maintenance platform, not even room to turn around, let alone sit. I listened my way through my bossa nova collection. I played Connecto on my helmet HUD until every time I blinked I saw tumbling, spinning gold stars. I scanned my family's social space entries offline. By the time I got to Meridian, I was 2 degrees off hypothermic. I couldn't afford the time it would take to repressurize for the train, so I went dirty and fast on the Baltron. I knew I would vomit. I held it until the 3rd and final jump. The look on the Baltron attendant's face when I came out of the capsule at Queen of the South was a thing to be seen. So I am told. I couldn't see it. But if I could afford the capsule, I could afford the shower to clean it up. And there are people in Queen who will happily clean vomit out of a sasuit for the right number of bitsies. Say what you like about the Vorontsovs. They pay handsomely. All this I did, the endless hours riding the train like a moon hobo, the hypothermia, and being slingshotted in a can of my own barf, because I knew that if Achi had 4 weeks, I could not be far behind. We met in a cafe on the 12th level of the new Chandra Quadra. We hugged, we kissed, we cried a little. I smelled sweet by then. Below us, excavators dug and sculpted, a new level every 10 days. We held each other at arm's length and looked at each other. Then we drank mint tea on the balcony. We didn't talk about the bones at once. It was 8 lunes since we last saw each other. We talked, we networked, we shared. I made Achi laugh. She laughed like soft rain. I told her about King Dong, that the Mackenzie dusters and Vorontsov track queens were stamping out in the dust like boys would. She clapped her hands to her mouth in naughty glee, but laughed with her eyes. So wrong. So funny. Achi was out of contract. The closer you are to your moon day, the shorter the contract, sometimes down to minutes of employment. But this was different. AKA did not want her ideas. They were recruiting direct from Accra and Kumasi, Ghanaians for a Ghanaian company. She was pitching ideas to the LDC for their new port at Meridian. Quadras 3 kilometers deep. A sculpted city, like living in the walls of a Titanic cathedral. The LDC were polite, but they had been talking about development funding for 2 lunes now. Her savings were running low. She woke up looking at the tick of the 4 elementals on her lens. She was considering moving to a smaller space. I can pay your per diems, I said. I have lots of money. And then we talked about the bones. Achi could not decide until I got my report. The guilt, the ghost of doing something wrong. She could not have borne it if her decision influenced my decision to stay with the moon or go back to Earth. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be here on this balcony drinking piss tea. I didn't want Achi to have forced the decision to go to the medics on me. I didn't want there to be a decision for me to make. Then, the wonder. I remember it so clearly. A flash of gold in the corner of my vision. Something marvelous. A woman flying. A flying woman. Her arms were outspread. She hung in the sky like a crucifix. Our Lady of Flight. Then I saw wings shimmer and run with rainbow colors. Wings transparent and strong as a dragonfly's. The woman hung a moment, then folded her gossamer wings around her, and fell. She tumbled, now diving head first, flicked her wrists, flexed her shoulders. A glimmer of wings slowed her. Then she spread her full wingspan and pulled up out of her dive into a soaring spiral high above Chandra Quadra. "Oh," I said. I had been holding my breath. I was shaking with wonder. If you could fly, why would you ever do anything else? It's commonplace now, anyone can do it, but back then, there, I saw what we could do in this place. I went to the Mackenzie Metals Medical Center, and the medic put me in the scanner. He passed magnetic fields through my body, and the machine gave me my bone density analysis. I was 8 days behind Achi. 5 weeks, and then my residency on the moon would become citizenship. Or I could fly back to Earth, to Brazil. That night, the golden woman swooped through my dreams. Achi slept beside me. I had booked a hostel room. The bed was wide, the air was as fresh as Queen of the South could make, and the taste of the water did not set your teeth on edge. Oh, that golden woman flying loops through my certainties. Queen of the South hadn't gone to a 3-shift society, so it never went completely dark. I pulled Achi's sheet around me and went out onto the balcony. I leaned on the rail and looked out at the walls of lights, lives and decisions behind every light. This was an ugly world. It put a price on everything. It demanded a negotiation from everyone. Out at the railhead, I had seen a new thing among some of the surface workers, a medallion or a little votive tucked into a patch pocket. A woman in Virgin Mary robes, one half of her face a black angel, the other half a naked skull. It was the first time I met Donna Luna. One half of her face dead, but the other was alive. The moon was not a dead satellite, she was a living world. Hands and hearts and hopes like mine shaped her. Here there was no Mother Nature, no Gaia to set against human will. Everything that lived, we made. Donna Luna was hard and unforgiving, but she was beautiful. She could be a woman with dragonfly wings flying. I stayed on the hotel balcony until the roof reddened with sunup. Then I went back to Achi. I wanted to make love with her again. My motives were all selfish. Things that are difficult with friends are easier with lovers. It was Achi's idea to make a game out of it. We must clench our fists behind our backs, like scissors, paper, stone, and count to 3. Then we open our fists, and in them there will be something, some small object that will say beyond any doubt what we have decided. We must not speak, because if we say even a word, we will influence each other. It was the only way she could bear it, if it was quick and clean and we didn't speak a word. And a game. We went back to the balcony table of the cafe to play the game. 2 glasses of mint tea. I remember the air smelled of rock dust over the usual electricity and sewage. Every 5th sky panel was blinking. A less than perfect world. I think we should do this kind of quickly, Achi said, and her right hand was behind her back so fast I caught my breath. Now, the time was now. I slipped my small object out of my bag and clenched it in my hidden fist. 1, 2, 3, Achi said. We opened our fists. She held a nazar, an Arabic charm, concentric teardrops of blue, white, and black lunar glass, like an eye. In my hand was a tiny icon of Donna Luna, black and white, living and dead. The last things were simple and swift. All farewells should be sudden, I think. I booked Achi on the cycler out. There was always space on the return orbit. She booked me into the LDC Medical Center. A flash of light, and the chib was bonded permanently to my eye. No handshake, no congratulations, no welcome. All I had done was decide to continue doing what I was doing. The cycler would come round the far side and rendezvous with the moon loop in 3 days. 3 days. It focused our feelings. It kept us from crying too much. I went with Achi on the train to Meridian. We had a whole side row of seats to ourselves, and we curled up like small, burrowing animals. "I'm scared," she said. It hurt going back. The cycler slowly spins you up to Earth gravity, and then there's the G's coming down. She could be months in a wheelchair. Swimming, they say, is the closest a returnee can come to being on the moon. The water supports you while you build up muscle and bone mass again. Achi loved to swim. And then were the doubts. What if she had been mixed up with someone else, and she was already past the point of no return? Would they try to bring her back to the moon? She couldn't bear that. It would kill her as surely as the earth shattering her bones, suffocating her under her own weight. I understood then that she hated the moon. She had always hated it, the danger, the fear, but most of all, the people. The same faces looking into your face forever, wanting something from you, wanting and wanting and wanting. No one can live that way, she said. It's inhuman. I was the only thing that made the moon bearable for her. And I was staying, and she was leaving. So I told her the thing I kept secret, the thing I had seen out in Landsberg that would make me a dragon. It was so simple. I just looked at something I saw every day in a different way. Helium-3, the key to the post-oil economy. Mackenzie Metals threw away helium-3 every day, and I thought, how could the Mackenzies not see it? Surely they must. I couldn't be the only one. But family and family companies especially, they have strange fixations and blindnesses. Mackenzies mine metal. Metal mining is what they do. They can't imagine anything else, and so they miss what's right under their noses. I could make it work. That's what I told Achi. I knew how to do it, but not with the Mackenzies. They'd take it off me. If I tried to fight, they'd just bury me. Or kill me. It's cheaper. The court of Clavius would make sure my family were compensated, but that would be the end of my hopes for dynasty. I would make it work for me. I would build a dynasty. I would be the 5th dragon. Mackenzie, Asamoah, Vorontsov, Sun, Corta. I liked the sound of that. I told her this on the train to Meridian. The seatback screen showed the surface. On a screen outside your helmet, it is always the same. It is gray and soft and ugly and covered in footprints. Inside the train were workers and engineers, lovers and partners, and even a couple of small children. There was noise and color and drinking and laughing, swearing and sex, and us curled up in the back against the bulkhead. And, I thought, this is the moon. Achi gave me a gift at the moon loop gate. It was the last thing she owned. Everything else had been sold. There were 8 passengers at the departure gate, with friends, family, amours to see them off. No one left alone. The air smelled of coconut, so different from the vomit, sweat, unwashed bodies of the arrival gate. Mint tea was available from a dispensing machine. No one drank it. Achi's gift was a document cylinder, crafted from bamboo. My instructions were to open it after she was gone. The departure was so fast, the way they say executions are. The VTO staff had everyone strapped into their seats and were sealing the capsule door before either I or Achi could respond. I saw her mouth begin a goodbye, saw her wave fingers. Then the locks sealed and the elevator took the capsule up to the tether platform. I tried to imagine the moon loop, a spinning spoke of M5 fiber 20 centimeters wide and 200 kilometers long. Up there, the ascender was climbing towards the counterbalance mass, shifting the center of gravity and sending the whole tether into a surface-grazing orbit. Only in the final moments of approach would the white cable be visible, seemingly descending vertically from the star-filled sky. The grapple connected, and the capsule was snatched from the platform. Up there, one of those bright stars was the ascender, sliding down the tether, again shifting the center of mass so that the whole ensemble moved into a higher orbit. At the top of the loop, the grapple would release and the cycler catch the capsule. All engineering, all process, all technical. So I kept the terrible emptiness from me, like charms. I tried to put names on the stars, the cycler, the ascender, the counterweight, the capsule freighted with my amour, my love, my friend. The comfort of physics. I watched until a new capsule was loaded into the gate. Already the next tether was wheeling up over the horizon. Then I went to buy coffee. Yes, coffee. The price was outrageous. I dug into my savings, but it was the real thing, imported, not spun up from an organic printer. The importer let me sniff it. I cried. She sold me the paraphernalia as well. The equipment I needed simply didn't exist on the moon. I took it all back to my hotel. I ground to the specified grain. I boiled the water. I let it cool to the correct temperature. I poured it from a height for maximum aeration. I stirred it. I made it like I made this coffee for you, sister. You never forget these things. While it drew, I opened Achi's gift. I unrolled drawings. Concept art for a habitat the realities of the moon would never let her build. A lava tube, enlarged and sculpted with faces. The faces of the orishas, each 100 meters high, round and smooth and serene, overlooked terraces of gardens and pools. Waters cascaded from their eyes and open lips. Pavilions and belvederes were scattered across the floor of the vast cavern. Vertical gardens ran from floor to artificial sky, like the hair of the gods. Balconies. She loved balconies. Galleries and arcades. Windows. Pools. You could swim from one end of this Orisha world to the other. She had inscribed it, a habitation for a dynasty. This is Achi's gift, all around you. When the importer had rubbed a pinch of ground coffee under my nose, memories of childhood, the sea, college, friends, family, celebrations flooded me. They say smell is the sense most closely linked to memory. When I smelled the coffee I had prepared, I experienced something new. Not memories, but a vision. I saw the sea. And I saw Achi gone back, on a board, in the sea. It was night, and she was paddling the board out, through the waves and beyond the waves, sculling herself forward along the silver track of the moon on the sea. I plunged, poured, and savored the aroma of the coffee. I drank my coffee. It still doesn't taste the way it smells. He's been here all along, sitting, waiting for me to call him in, listening to all my stories and digressions, And smiling because I'm the engineer. I'm the one who's supposed to be no nonsense, get to the point. He always was patient to a fault. Carlos, you'll have to wait a little longer. But not much longer. Achi left, and I never saw her or talked to her again. I worked. I had things to do, no time to miss people. Look at my productivity. I didn't miss her at all. It was a good thing she had gone. Love would only have been a distraction. I had a business to build. I was so busy I missed my moon day. That's a lie. It's a lie, too, that I didn't miss Achi. I missed her so hard the loss was an ache in me, a vacuum. I missed her sweet seriousness, her tiny kindnesses, like tea by my bed every morning, or laying out my surface suit neat and right, her tidiness where I was a slob, her attention to detail, the way she would straighten things if we were in the apartment or a hotel or a pod, set things square to the walls of the room. Her inability to get my jokes or pronounce Portuguese. So many things. I pushed them all down in my memory, did not think of them because thinking of her made me think of all the things I would lose forever on the moon. Breathing free, sunlight on my naked face, looking up into an open sky, the far horizon, the moon at the edge of the world, laying a silver path out across the ocean. Oceans of water, not dust. The wind. Listen. I worked like the devil, modeling and designing and planning. It would work. It was simple, but you can only work so much before it eats your stomach and soul. I took a break, an Adriana Corta break. My old mining schoolmates from Demin would have been proud. I worked the 12 bars of Orion Quadra. I fell in through the door of the 9th. By the 10th, I was taking bets on how high a tower of shot glasses I could build on the bar. 15. By the 11th, I was in an alcove touching foreheads with this sweet, big-eyed Santos boy and burbling all my plans and ambitions with his big eyes wide and pretending he was interested. I never made it to bar 12. I was in bed with the Santos big eyes. I was a lousy lover. I cried all night. He was sweet enough to cry along. I didn't call my family for a long time after Moon Day. I was afraid I would realize I had made a terrible decision, one that I could not reverse. Then I thought, for most of human history, migration has been a one-way trip. Old Portuguese families would hold funerals for children going off to a new life in Brazil. Agency is a comforting fairy story. Life is a series of doors that only open one way. We can never return. This is the world, and we must live in it the best we can. But I did listen to a lot of music from the old world, the music my mother loved and sang around the house, and it was as if it floated up from that blue planet down there and settled itself over a new landscape, not the gray hills and scarps and rills and all that ugliness, but the people. The only beautiful thing on the moon is the people. So, I was a woman of the moon now. I had committed myself to a new world and a new life. I had an idea, and I had money. If you emigrate, the return part of your fare, minus any outstanding balance and the inevitable fees, is refunded to you. I bought convertible LDC bonds. Safe, solid, with a high return. I had a stable of legal and design AIs, and a model I was itching to test out in the real world. What I didn't have was a clue. More specifically, I had no idea how to turn all this into a business. I didn't have a plan. It was engineering of a kind different from any I knew. How to plan a company and make it work. Then I met Eiling. I had cast a dark net for potential finance directors. None of my people was ever any good with money, and I was no exception. It was all deliciously clandestine, encrypted messages. This was before we had familiars, and secretive meetings in tea houses that shifted location at the last minute. I could not risk Mackenzie Metals discovering my plan. You think we live in a wild world now. It's nothing like the frontier days. But there she was, this woman from Porto, and she knew all her stuff, and she knew which questions to ask and which not to ask. But can I tell you? What really decided me to take her on was that she spoke Portuguese. I learned English, and I was learning Globo. It was beginning to take over as the common language, especially because the machines understood the accent. But there are things you can only say with your own words. We could talk. I have worked with her every day since. She is my oldest and dearest friend. She will never disappoint me, though I know I have disappointed her many, many times. She said, "You don't talk money, ever. You don't pay anything unless I tell you to, ever. And you need a project engineer. And I happen to know one, a Brazilian boy, a Paulistano, 3 months up." And that was Carlos. Oh, but he was an arrogant bastard. Tall and good-looking and funny, and knew it. He had that Paulistano sense of superiority. Better educated, better food, better music, better work ethic. Cariocas lived on the beach and sat around drinking all night. Never did a stroke of work. We met in a bar. We ate shirataki noodles. You wonder that I remember we ate shirataki noodles? I remember everything about that meeting. 1980s casual was the look then, and he wore chinos and a Hawaiian shirt. He treated everything I said as if it was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. He was arrogant and annoying and sexist, and he made me so mad. I was a little in hate with him. I said, "Is it all women you have a problem listening to, or just this one?" Then he spent the next hour laying out the business plan that would become the foundations of Corta. Oh, but it was fun that year when we chased our ideas all over the moon. Gods know how we managed to keep breathing. A fair refund is significant money, but it runs from you like dust, even when your finance director and project engineer are only taking for the 4 elementals and sleeping on friends' floors. The meetings, the pitches, the prospectuses, the promises, the rejections, the realization that a quick no is better than a long maybe. The thrill when we pinned down an actual real investor and tasted her bitsies. I was clear. I didn't want Earth-based investors and equity funds. I didn't want to be like the Swans, constantly fighting their way out of control from Beijing. I wanted to be like the Mackenzies. There was a proper lunar corporation. Bob Mackenzie had sold his entire terrestrial operation, transferred the funds to the moon, and said to the rest of his family, "Mackenzies are moon people now. Move up or move out." I had committed to the moon. I could never go back to Earth. I didn't want Earth coming to me. They would be customers, not owners. Corta Eliu would be my child. Elenji Braga is my dearest friend. She's a board member, but she has never been an owner. Eleng and I worked on the money, while Carlos developed the prototype and the business. The moon was a much smaller place then. We couldn't have built and trialed an extractor without word running round the far side and back again before we'd even locked helmets. So we went to the far side and hired a couple of units from the faculty. It wasn't the university then. It wasn't much more than an observatory and outpost for research into lethal pathogens. If anything went wrong, it was as far as you could get from Earth, and you could dump, DP, and irradiate the entire site. The tunnels were far too close to the surface. Every night I imagined the radiation sleeting through my ovaries. We coughed all the time. It could have been the dust, but we suspected it was some little souvenir from the pathogen lab. Carlos built the prototype extractor. I say built. I mean he hired the contractors, the bots, the quality control teams. He showed it to me, and I said, no, that's not going to work. That's not robust enough. That process is inefficient. What about maintenance access? We fought like crazy. We fought like a married couple. Still, I didn't love him. I told Eleng this, over and over and over. I must have driven her mad telling her how stupid and arrogant and obstinate he was, but she never once told me to just shut up and sleep with the guy. Because I was crazy about him. He could not have been more different from Achi. She went from friend to lover. He could be a lover, but never a friend. The attractions were all different, all wrong, and real. I thought about him in bed. I thought about him naked. I thought about him doing something stupid and uncharacteristic and romantic, like bending over the schematics to see what this annoying woman was on about, and now and then kissing me. I flicked off to him. I think he heard. What is it about attraction? I'll tell you where I first kissed Carlos. In a little dome on the Mare Fecunditatis that he built for me. Not even a dome. It was a couple of rover pods bermed over with regolith that we used as a base for the field trials. We broke the prototype down and shipped it from Farside in anonymized crates by Baltran, jump after jump after jump, so it looked random. Yet they all ended up where we wanted them, when we wanted them. Then we ran them out by rover to our little base, and our team put them all together in the ass end of nowhere where no one would ever look. We were burning money like oxygen by now. We had enough left for one field test, one tweak, and our VIPs. It had to work. We all huddled in our pod and watched the extractor rumble out across the mare. I fired up the extraction heads, the separator screws. Then I hit the switch on the separator, and the mirrors swiveled and caught the sun and turned it on the separator, and I burst into tears. It was the greatest thing I had ever seen in my life. We got our first reading after an hour. I don't think I breathed once those entire 60 minutes. Gas spectrometer readouts. Hydrogen, water, helium-4, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, argon, neon, radon. Volatiles we could sell to AKA and the Vorontsovs. Not what we wanted, not what we were looking for. That tiny spike on the graph, so much smaller than all of the others. I magnified the axes. We all crowded around the display. There. Helium-3. exactly where we thought it would be, in the proportions we expected. Sweet, sweet little spectrograph spike. We were in helium. I screamed and danced up and down. Aileen kissed me, and then she burst into tears. Then I kissed Carlos. I kissed Carlos again. I kissed Carlos again, and did not stop. We drank cheap VTO vodka all huddled together in our tiny pod and got stupidly, dangerously drunk. And then I pulled Carlos into my bunk, and we made silent, furious, giggling sex while everyone else slept around us. We conceived a city in that bunk. Those two pods, that shroud of regolith, over years and decades, became João Deus. I didn't marry Carlos right away. I had to get the Nika right, and anyway, after Mare Fecunditatis, there was too much to do. I made the calls to our VIPs and booked the tickets, return trips, Earth-Moon for 6 people. 2 from EDF Areva, 2 from PFC India, 2 from Kansai Fusion. I had been working them for months. Telepresence conferences, presentations, sales pitches. I knew they wanted to escape the U.S.-Russian duopoly on terrestrial helium-3 that was keeping the prices of fusion power high and stifling development. It was the oil age again. It was our biggest risk. Executives from 3 of Earth's smaller fusion companies all arrive on the moon at the same time? Even the Mackenzies could work that one out. The question was when they would move, not if. Our sole advantage was that they didn't know who we were. Yet. If we could finish the demonstration, negotiate the deal, and sign the contract before Bob Mackenzie loosed his blades, then we could defend the contract in the court of Clavius. We put them all up in Meridian's best hotel. We took care of their 4 elementals. We bought the French delegates wine, the Indian delegates whiskey, and the Japanese whiskey, too. As I said, we were burning money like oxygen. The night before we were due to ship the VIPs out to Mare Fecunditatis, Mackenzie Metals discovered us. I got a message from our fecundity base. Dusters with Mackenzie Metals logos had blown up the prototype extractor. They were destroying the volatile storage tanks. They were coming for the base. They were at the base. I heard no more. I remember I sat in my room, and I had no idea what to do. I sat in my room and did not know what to feel. I was numb. I was falling. It was like free fall. I wanted to vomit. The extractor, all our work, but more, so much more, the lives. People I had laughed with, drunk with, worked with, people who were more my family than my family, people who had trusted me. They were dead because they had trusted me. I had killed them. We were children, I realized. We had been playing at businesses. The Mackenzies were adult, and they did not play. We were a children's crusade, marching into our own ignorance. I sat in my room and imagined Mackenzie blades in the elevator, at the door, outside the window. Carlos saved me. Carlos pulled me down. Carlos was my gravity. We win by getting that output deal, he said. We win by building Corta. That was the first time I had ever heard that name. With his own money, Carlos hired freelance security for our people and materiel. With my own money, I booked the VIPs onto the moon loop and told them of our change of plan. We would be spinning them around the moon on a tether to Farside, where we stationed the second prototype of the helium-3 extractor. Carlos had made the stipulation on the first day of his project management: never build just one prototype. We put our VIPs into a capsule, slung them around the moon, followed in the next, and showed them what our extractor could do. Then we took the extracted helium and fired it up in the University of Farside's LDX reactor. With the last of our money, we contracted legal AIs to draft the output deal and signed it that night. Not quite the end of our money. With the very end of it, Carlos and I had the AIs draw up a marriage contract. With the very, very end of it, we threw a wedding. Oh, but it was cheap and blissful. Eleng was my bridesmaid. The only other attendee was the witness from the LDC. Then we went and had eggs and sperm frozen. There was no time for romanticism or a family. We had an empire to build, but we wanted children. We wanted a dynasty. We wanted to safeguard the future once we had built a future safe for them. And that could be years, decades. Creating Corta was nothing compared to building Corta. I went for loons without seeing Carlos. I slept, ate, exercised, made love when I could, which was little, rarely. We need allies, Carlos said. I tried to build relationships. The 4 dragons had heard the name of Corta. The Swans were aloof, engaged on their own projects and politics. The Vorontsovs had their eyes turned up to space, though I secured favorable moon-loop launch rates from them. The Mackenzies were my enemies. The Asamoahs, maybe because our business did not threaten theirs, maybe because we both came to the moon with nothing and made something, maybe because they identified with the underdog, they became my friends. They are still my friends. With a secure and steady supply of cheap fuel, my terrestrial customers soon achieved a market position that forced their competitors to negotiate with us or go bankrupt. Shortly after that, the U.S. and Russian helium-3 markets collapsed. I beat America and Russia at the same time. Within 2 years, Corta had moved into a monopoly position. See, there's no talk more boring than money and business talk. We built Corta. We turned the little hut where we made love into a city. High times, the highest times. We were breathless with excitement. A point came where our success bred its own success. We were making money just by existing. The extractors scooped up the dust. The moon loop sends the canisters flying earthwards. We stood on the surface with our helmets touching and looked at the lights of planet Earth. It was ridiculously easy. Anyone could have thought of it. But I did. See how it hardens you? In all the rush and excitement and work, I forgot about the people who died out on the Sea of Fecundity. My team, the ones who gave to me and never got to see the success or share in it. People say the moon is hard. No, people are hard. Always people. I was still sending money to my family. I made them rich. I made them celebrities. They were in Veja magazine. the sister, the brother of Our Lady of Helium, the Iron Hand, the woman who lit the world. They had a wonderful apartment and big cars and pools and private tutors and security guards, and one day I said, "Stop. You've taken. You've dined out and partied and grown fat on my money and name, and not one word of thanks, not one acknowledgement of what I have done up here, not one glint of gratitude or appreciation. Your children, my nephews and nieces, don't even recognize my face. You call me the Iron Hand? Well, here's an iron judgment, the final gift from the moon. I have placed in a secure account fares for a one-way trip to the moon. If you want Corta money, work for Corta money. With Corta commit, or I will never send you so much as a single decima again. Come to the moon. Come and join me. Come and build a world and a Corta dynasty." Not one member of my family took up the offer. I cut them off. I haven't spoken to any of them in 40 years. My family is here. This is the Corta dynasty. Do you think that was harsh? The money, that's nothing. None of them would ever be poor again. Do you think I was wrong to cut them off without a word or even a thought? I could give you all the old excuses. Everything is negotiable. If you don't work, you don't breathe. The moon makes you hard. It's true, the moon changes you. It changed me so that if I ever went back to Earth, my lungs would collapse. My legs would fold under me. My bones would flake and splinter. And those 380,000 kilometers count. When you talk to home and you hear that 2.5-second delay before the reply comes, that pushes you away. You can never bridge that gap. It's built into the structure of the universe. It's physics that's hard. I haven't thought about them in 40 years. But I think about them now. I look back a lot. Things come up from my past without my calling them. I tell myself I have no regrets, but do I? I can't help thinking that it was all those years putting the company together, more in a sawsuit than out of one, in and out of rovers, up and down extractors, snuggling up with Carlos in that pod, the radiation shining through me. It's more advanced than I've told you, sister. The only one who knows is Dr. Macareg. I know Lucas went to the mother house. He knows my condition, but he doesn't know its full extent. Listen to me, the euphemisms, advanced, full extent. I can feel death, sister. I can see its little black eyes. Sister, whatever Lucas says, whatever he threatens, don't tell him this. He would only try and do something, and there is nothing he can do. He always has to prove himself, and I've hurt him. Oh, I've hurt him so terribly. So much to put right. The light is running out. But I haven't even told you the story of the knife fight with Robert Mackenzie. It's legend. I'm legend. Maybe you haven't heard it. I sometimes forget there are generations after me. Not forget, how could I forget my grandchildren? More that I can't believe the time that has passed since those days, that people could forget them. Such days. The Mackenzies stopped physical attacks on our materiel as soon as we had enough money to hire our own security. There was this Brazilian ex-naval officer, laid off whenever Brazil decided it couldn't afford a navy anymore. He had been in the submarines, and his theory was that warfare on the moon was all submarine warfare. All vehicles under pressure in a lethal environment. I hired him. He's still my head of security. We decided one bold strike would end the war. We attacked Crucible. The Mackenzies and VTO had just completed Equatorial 1. Now Crucible could refine rare earths continuously. It still is, a magnificent achievement. I forget I played a part in it when I quit Mackenzie Metals and became a Vorontsov Trek Queen on my way to founding Corta. Carlos conceived the plan. We shall breach Equatorial 1 and paralyze Crucible. I remember the faces around the table. There were shock, amazement, fear. Heitor said it can't be done. Carlos said, it will be done. Your job is to tell me how we do it. We did it with 6 rovers, 2 teams of 3. We timed the attack just as Mackenzie Metals was to deliver on an important new rare earths contract with Xiaomi. Carlos went with the first team. I rode with the second. It was so exciting. 2 rovers full of big, brawny escoltas, one with the demolition team. It was really quite simple. We hit Crucible on the eastern Procellarum. The escoltas formed a periphery. The demolition teams struck simultaneously 3 kilometers upline and downline from Crucible. I watched the charges blow. The rails flew up so high I thought they would go into orbit. I watched them tumble away, catching the sunlight, and it was the closest we can get to fireworks on the moon. Everyone cheered and whooped, but I couldn't, because I hated to see fine, brilliant engineering destroyed in a flash. Track I might have laid myself. I hated it because no sooner had we built a thing to be proud of, we destroyed it. The clever part was, even as we ran with Mackenzie Metals rovers on our tails, our secondary attacks went in 20 kilometers up and down the line. The VTO repair teams would have to bridge those breaches before they could rebuild the ones closer to Crucible. Even if VTO got teams out within the hour, Crucible would be in darkness for a week. They would miss the delivery deadline. We lost their blades in the chaotic terrain of Eddington. After the Battle of East Procellarum, Mackenzie Metals moved their attacks to the court of Clavius. I think I would have preferred the war of blades and bombs. Their tactics varied, but their strategy was clear and simple. Bleed Corta to death through legal fees. They hit us with suits for breach of contract, breach of copyright, personal injury, corporate damages, plagiarism, damages suits for every single crew person on Crucible on the day of the attack. Suit after suit after suit. Most of them were swept away by our AIs as soon as they were served, but for every one we dismissed, their AIs created 10 more. AIs are prolific, and AIs are cheap, but they're not free. The judges we had agreed upon finally ruled against any further frivolous suits, and that Mackenzie Metals lay a solid suit with a reasonable chance of success. They did. It named Adriana Maria do Seu Maungiferu Arena de Corta in 40 separate instances of breach of Mackenzie Metals' patent in my designs for the extractor. AIs, lawyers, judges settled in for a long trial. I didn't. I knew this could drag, and Mackenzie Metals would file injunctions against our exports, and for each one we dismissed, they would file another. They wanted us soiled goods. They wanted my name and reputation dust. They wanted our terrestrial clients leery of us, leery enough to consider investing a little seed money in a helium-3 extraction venture with an established company of good standing who could deliver the goods, Mackenzie Fusion. I had to end this, hard and fast. I challenged Robert Mackenzie, in name and person, to trial by combat. I didn't tell any of my legals. I didn't tell Eleng. I didn't tell Etor, though he may have guessed, because I asked him to teach me something of the way of the knife. I didn't tell Carlos. There is angry, and there is furious, and there is a deeper rage beyond those, for which we don't have a name. It's pale and very pure and very cold. I imagine it's what the Christian God feels at sin. I saw it in Carlos when he found out what I was going to do. It ends it, I said, once and for all. And if you get hurt, Carlos said, and if you die, if Corta dies, then I'm dead too, I said. Do you think they'll just let us walk away? The Mackenzies repay 3 times. Half the moon was in the court arena that day, or so it seemed to me. I came up onto the fighting floor, and I just saw faces, faces, faces all around me going up, up, up. All those faces, and me in a pair of running shorts and a crop top, with a borrowed escolta knife in my hand. I wasn't afraid. No, not a bit. The judges called for Robert Mackenzie. The judges called again for Robert Mackenzie. They instructed his lawyers to approach them. I stood in the center of the court arena with another woman's knife in my hand and looked up at all the faces. I wanted to ask them, why have you come here? What have you come to see? Is it victory or is it blood? I call on you, Robert Mackenzie, I shouted. Defend yourself. In a heartbeat, there was absolute silence in the arena. Again I called on Robert Mackenzie. And a third time, I call on you, Robert Mackenzie. Defend yourself, your name, and your company. I called him 3 times, and at the end I stood alone on the fighting floor, and the court erupted. The judges were shouting something, but no one could hear over the uproar. I was lifted shoulder high and carried out of the court of Clavius, and I was laughing and laughing and laughing with my knife still gripped in my hand. I didn't let go of it until I got to the hotel where Team Corta had set up headquarters. Carlos didn't know whether to laugh or rage. He cried. You knew, he said. All along, I said. Bob Mackenzie could never fight a woman. 10 days later, the court of Clavius established a process to allow proxy fighters in the case of trial by combat. Mackenzie Metals tried to launch a new suit. No judge on the moon would touch it. Corta won. I won. I challenged Robert Mackenzie to a knife fight and won. And now, no one remembers it. But I was legend. Death and sex, isn't that it? People make love after funerals. Sometimes during funerals. It's the loud cry of life. Make more babies, make more life. Life is the only answer to death. I defeated Bob Mackenzie in the court arena. It wasn't death, not that day, but it did focus my mind most wonderfully. Corta was secure. Time to build the dynasty now. I tell you this, there is no greater aphrodisiac than being carried out of the court arena with your knife in your hand. Carlos couldn't keep his hands off me. He was possessed. He was a big dick machine. I know it's not seemly for an old woman to say such things, but he was a fuck bandit. He was deadly and relentless. And it was the best time in my life, the only time I could lie back and say, I'm safe. So of course I said, let's make a baby. We started interviewing madrinas immediately. I was 40 years old. I had drunk a lot of vacuum, swallowed a lot of radiation, snorted a seaful of dust. Gods know if things were still working in there, let alone if I was capable of carrying a normal, healthy pregnancy to term. Too many uncertainties. I needed engineered solutions. Carlos had agreed with me. Host mothers, paid surrogates who would be so much more than just rented wombs. We wanted them to be part of the family, to take on those elements of infant care that we simply didn't have the time, or, to be honest, the taste for. Babies are tedious. Kids only start to become human on their 5th birthday. We must have interviewed 30 young, fit, healthy, fecund Brazilian women before we found Ivete. This is how I came into contact with your sisterhood. The Brazilian community said, talk to my Odunglaji. She has family trees and genealogies and medical histories on every brasileiro and brasileira who comes to the moon. And a fair few Argentinians and Peruvians and Uruguayans and Ghanaians and Ivorians and Nigerians, too. She will set you right. She did, and I rewarded her for her services, and, well, you know the rest of the story. We drew up the contract, and her legal systems looked over it, and my Odunglaji advised her, and we agreed. We had already started a number of embryos. We picked one, and then asked Ivete how she wanted to do this. Did she just want to go to the med center for implantation, or did she want to have sex with me, or Carlos, or both of us? To make it personal, with affection and connection. We spent 2 nights in a hotel in Queen of the South, and then we had the embryo implanted. It took right away. My Odunglaji had selected her madrinas well. Ivete came to João de Deus with us, and we gave her her own apartment and full-time medical support. 9 months later, Rafa was born. The gossip networks were full of pictures and excitement. Picture rights were part of Ivete's remuneration package, but the cheers were not warm. I could smell the disapproval. Surrogate mothers, rent-a-womb. They all had a weekend of wild sex together in a hotel in Queen. A threesome, you know. Rafa was hardly off the teat before I was already planning the next in the succession. Carlos and I started looking for a new madrina. At the same time, I had my first visions of this place. João de Deus was no place to bring up a family. There are children there now, but back then it was a frontier town. It was a mining town. It was raw and rough and red-blooded. I remembered Achi's parting gift to me. I found the bamboo document tube easily. 10 years since she had left. So fast. waterfalls and stone faces, a garden carved into the heart of the moon. It was as if she had seen the future, or the insides of my heart. I commissioned selenologists, found this place hidden away in the rock like a geode for billions of years. A palace, a child, another one coming together in the Meridian Medical Facility, a business and a name. Finally, I was the Iron Hand. Then, Carlos was killed. Did you hear what I said? Carlos didn't die, he was killed. There was intent in it. There was purpose and ill will. Nothing was ever proved, but I know he was killed. He was murdered. And I know who did it. I'm sorry. I get over-emotional. It's been so long, half my life without him. But I see him so clearly. He comes and stands so close to me. I can see the texture of his skin. He had terrible skin. I can smell him. He had a very distinct, very personal smell. Sweet, like sugar. Sweet-smelling sugar man. His children have it too, the sweet sweat. I can hear him. I can hear the little whistle he made when he breathed through his nose, his chipped tooth. I see it all in such detail, and yet it doesn't seem real. It's as unreal to me as Rio. Did I ever live there? Did I waggle my toes in the ocean? We were together so short a time. I have lived 3 lives, before the moon, Carlos, after Carlos. 3 lives so different, they don't feel like me. I still find it hard to talk about. I haven't forgiven. I don't even understand the concept. Why should I stop feeling what I honestly feel? Why should I pardon the injustice? Why should I take all the hurt that's been done to him and say, none of that matters, Carlos. I have forgiven. Pious nonsense. Forgiveness is for Christians, and I am no Christian. He was out on a 5-day inspection run across the new Mare Imbrium fields. His rover underwent an uncontrolled depressurization in the Montes Caucasus. Uncontrolled depressurization. You understand what that means? An explosion. It was 40 years ago, and our engineering was not as good as it is now. But even then, rovers were sturdy, rovers were tough. They did not undergo uncontrolled depressurizations. It was sabotaged. A small device, internal pressurization, would do the rest. I went out on a Vorontsov lifeboat. The rover was scattered over 5 kilometers. There wasn't even enough to recycle for carbon. Do you hear my voice? Do you hear how I keep it flat and focused? How I choose my words like tools, precise and practical? This is still the only way I can talk about Carlos. I put a marker there, a pillar of laser-cut titanium. It will never rust, never discolor, never grow old and dusty. It will stand there for eons. That's right, I think. That's long enough. You killed Carlos Mateus de Madeiras Castro, Robert Mackenzie. I name you. You waited, you took your time, and you worked out how to hurt me most. You destroyed the thing I loved dearest. You paid me back. 3 times. 3 months later, Lucas was born. I never loved him as I loved Rafa. I couldn't. My Carlos was taken. Lucas was given back. It didn't seem a fair trade. And that's not right. That's not just. But human hearts are seldom just. But it was Rafa who heard the name of his father's killer whispered over his bed. He was the one grew up in that shadow with hate in his heart. Corta's cut. We begin and end with our names. Rafael, Lucas, Ariel, Carlinhos, little Carlos. Wagner. I couldn't be kind to that boy. We get notions into our heads, and then we look around, and a lifetime has gone past, and they become dogmas. And Ariel, why didn't I? No point. Once an engineer, always an engineer. It has taken me a lifetime to realize that lives are not problems to be solved. My children are the achievements that make me most proud. Money. What can we spend money on here? A faster printer, a bigger cave, empire? It's dust out there. Success? It has the shortest half-life of any known substance. But my children, do you think I've built strong enough to stand 10,000 years? Yemanja laid a silver path out across the ocean, and I walked up it until I came to the moon. What I like about the Orishas, their particular wisdom, they don't offer much. No holiness, no heaven, just one opportunity once given. Miss it, and it will never come again. Take it, and you can walk all the way to the stars. I like that. My mamai understood this. My story is finished now. Everything else is just history. But do you know, I wasn't average. I wasn't Jane outside. I was extraordinary. Sister, excuse me. Yemanja has an emergency call.